And the title of today's webcast is Influence with or Without Authority. The sponsor of today's event and also of LDI is GlaxoSmithKline, and we do thank them. There will be continuing education for this webcast, and I will be providing a link at the end of the webcast which will be available tomorrow on the LDI webcast on the virtual community. That will link you to that evaluation. Again, I announced about questions and answers. Please feel free to raise your hand or also to enter them in the chat box. And without further ado, I would like to introduce to you Stephen Gaffney, many of whom will remember from LDI. He is an author, he's an executive coach, and he is a speaker. And he presents on honest interpersonal communication, influence, and leadership. And so we're very, very pleased to have Stephen with us today. And Stephen, I'm going to hand the floor over to you.
Thank you, Kate, and good afternoon, everybody. So let me start off by asking, how many of you, just want you to think to yourself, do you have a job? Have you ever been married? Have you ever been promoted? If you think about it, if the answer is yes to any of those, you've actually persuaded somebody, influenced them, and that's really the subject matter of the talk today. Not about getting married or getting a job or getting promoted per se, but the skills that we're going to cover is about influencing that you can use in any situation. Because here's the issue. We all influence people all day long. The problem is that we're not often conscious of what we're doing, so then we do it more by accident than by demand. So what I hope to do in the couple hours that I have with you is to make you aware of what you've done when you've successfully persuaded somebody so that you can do this on demand again rather than by accident. Also, I want you to expand hopefully in the way we view influence because it's actually one of the key leadership skills. Our ability to lead others is directly proportional to how well we can influence others. So let me go through the objective and what we're going to cover. But so Kate, if we can change, yeah, thank you. But before going there, I just want to pause and just say it's an honor to be with you all. Previous to 2009, when people talked about oncology, cancer, yeah, I kind of got it, but not really got it. And then in April 2009, I was diagnosed with testicular cancer. Fortunately, of course, as you all know, that's one of the good kinds of cancers to get if you're going to get one because it can be treated, and of course, I'm completely fine. But I will tell you, after that experience, then as I'm wrapping up my treatment, finished off the chemo, went for my last major doctor's visit as a checkup before, then just going periodically for checkups. I get a call from my sister. She had breast cancer. She's fortunately fine today, but I just became so much more in the presence of how challenging this horrible disease is. And then subsequently, even in August, a customer of mine, a client of mine, passed away. He was battling 3 types of cancer, and in 2 days I go to a funeral for a friend of mine who actually died, who just passed away from melanoma cancer. So from my heart to you and for what you all do, I really appreciate what you do. And what I hope to do is really give you some skills that can make a huge difference. I read over some of your surveys, and some of you are sitting on some great ideas and really want to influence other folks, and you're having challenges. Sometimes challenges influencing doctors, sometimes patients, sometimes other nurses. And I hope to give you the strategies to make that happen. But here's a promise I have. By the time we're done in the 2-hour mark, if you finish this up and you don't see what you need to do to influence people, I want you to call me, and I'll work with you privately until you say, I got what I needed to get out of that webinar. So just in case we don't cover what you need, I will work with you on the side and privately. So let's be clear what the objective is. The objective is for us to be more effective in selling ideas and influencing people. The bottom line is to produce results. There's 2 major parts to this webinar. The first part is I'm going to talk about preparation, what to do even before having that honest, influential conversation. Then I'm going to go through the 6 most important steps when influencing someone else. So we're going to talk first about preparation before ever having that conversation. But then we're actually going to talk about how to have that honest, influential conversation. Along the way, any questions or comments, please let me know. And so what we can do is, because we had to put everybody on mute because I think someone had put us on hold and then there was some music and that kind of thing. What we can do, and Kate, tell me if this will work out well, is if they maybe write in the chat room they have a question, then we can try unmuting the lines. And folks, if you do put us on, if you can put the phone on mute just for extra precautionary note, and then if you have a question, then take your phone off mute, and we'll take everybody off mute. So, but Kate, will that work out well?
Yep, that'll work out well, and I'll just unmute everyone when someone would like to raise their hand. But this is not to discourage anyone from raising their hand. We really want to encourage this open communication.
Okay, so I'm going to give the first assignment that I'd like you to do. So if we go to the next slide, Kate, and choose an idea or request. What idea or request would you like to work on during this session, this case study? What I'd like you to do is, in your guidebook, hopefully you have it printed out, but if not, you can write it somewhere. What I'd like you to write down is, what would you like to work on in the next couple hours? Maybe, in other words, I want you to have a specific case study. Folks, let's face it. We've all attended some of these sessions, and it's like, oh, really, that's interesting. That's interesting. Oh, that's interesting. But then we finish up, and we're like, how do we use it? What I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through exactly what to do. So to get maximum usage of your time here, what I invite you to do is actually choose a specific example right now that you're wrestling with. So Sylvia, maybe something that you shared earlier, one of the things that you're wrestling with, and Ann, maybe there's an idea you have and you're waiting for that opportunity. Whatever the case may be, what I'd like you to do is think of a particular case study. And Sylvia and Ann, they had just spoke before we actually started officially at the session. But here's what I'd like you to do. Write it down on page 2 of your guidebook. So just to kind of whet your appetite and get you thinking, maybe there's an idea that you'd like to convince your boss, your customer, or maybe I shouldn't say customer, I should really say patient, but maybe a coworker. Maybe there's a procedure that you'd like other people to follow and they're not following. Maybe there's a guideline that they're not following. Maybe you have a request. You need help. You need more resources. I know some of you are experiencing that now, and you've actually probably asked for help, but you're not getting it, let's say. So maybe you want to work on that during the next couple hours, and I can walk you through about what to do so you can better persuade that person to grant you yes to your request. So maybe there's a request. Maybe there's some information you need. You're not getting the necessary data that you really need. And so maybe that's something you want to work on. And maybe there's a behavior or an action you'd like someone to do or actually stop doing. Maybe you're working with somebody and they're just not doing something you need them to do, like perform better in their job or a particular action. Or maybe there's something they're doing that you really want them to stop doing. Whatever the case may be, just a particular case study. Now, what I invite you to do is, if we can, we'll open up the phone lines, Kate, if that's okay, and let's try, and hopefully everybody has put their phone on mute except for if you got a question or comment. And what I'd like to do is, while you're thinking about a case study, take a couple examples. And if you're willing to share those examples through the phone, what I could do is actually make sure I use those examples as I go through the session. So it's basically some extra free coaching. So if you've got a particular example, maybe you wouldn't mind sharing that over the phone. And also, just kind of on a side point, everybody's probably at their desk, cubicle, wherever you're calling from, and you may be easily distracted, and there's email and stuff like that that you're trying to deal with. If you can put everything aside, because you know as well as I, and in fact probably you know better than I, when people get distracted, that's how we lose focus and we actually make mistakes. But we also miss out on certain things. So if you can put everything aside and just completely focus on this webinar. But anyway, having said this, Kate, can we open up the lines and try and make sure
do that right now.
Okay.
The conference has been unmuted.
Okay, well, we're going to have to.
I apologize. There'll be that background music while it's unmuted.
So just take a couple minutes while we're listening to music, and if you have an example. Does anybody have an example they'd like to come through the phone lines and wouldn't mind sharing? Case study? I'm sorry about this, folks, with the music. I don't know what else we can do because I want to hear from you. So,
So I like to influence my unit to start post-operative discharge callbacks.
Okay. And who is this?
Jennifer Kelly.
Okay, Jennifer. What's the toughest part about that?
They've done it in the past, and the past manager didn't pay attention to the outcomes, didn't do anything with the data.
Okay. Okay, so they didn't do anything with the data.
Yeah, and it's time out of their day.
Okay. Another one? Someone else want to share? Oh, folks, I forgot to tell you, anybody that shares or through the line, what I'm going to do is I'm going to send you some extra documents on what we're covering today. And specifically, here's what I'm going to send the folks who have shared. So already, Sylvia, Ann, and Jennifer, after the call, if you send us your email, we're going to send you the following documents. Basically, how to do something I wrote up about the 3 most important keys in ever doing any kind of presentation, whether it's to 1,000 people or 1 person. We'll send you that. We're also going to send you something I wrote up about how to eliminate all the complaining. You know, when people say the same thing over and over again, and it's endless, and how do you stop that from happening in a respectful way? And it goes through a formula. So anybody that shares something through this call today, we're going to send you that. So anyway, having said that, anyone else willing to share their example?
This is Cheryl Hackett from Great Falls, Montana, and I would like to try to convince people to do medical surveillance of healthcare workers that handle hazardous drugs.
Okay.
Hello?
And what's the biggest challenge?
It's not been done, and in today's current economic arena, cost.
Okay. Okay. So, yeah, how do we turn that on its head? Hopefully this will help out. Okay, so, Kate, if we could just put everybody back on mute. Folks, I'm really sorry about this.
The conference has been muted.
About whenever you're influencing somebody else, and that is about preparation. So, and you know what, Kate? I'm going to I'll jump with the slides just to make this easier because I just realized it's probably easier. Okay.
No problem, no problem. And that first part of your sentence, I'm sorry, probably got a little bit clipped there because of the muting.
Oh, no problem. Preparation. Here's what I want to talk to you about this. All right. One of the biggest missteps that people do is they haven't thought through what they're trying to persuade the other person to do. And so I'm going to go through the 4 most important keys in preparing yourself before influencing someone else. And I'd like you to rate yourself on a scale from 1 to 10 in each of the following categories I'm going to give you. Now, what you may be tempted to do is once I go through something, the very first key is to quickly rate yourself. But I'd actually like you to wait until I completely explain it because there are many facets of this which may seem simple, but is the devil's in the details, so to speak. So we're going to go through the 4 most important keys in preparing before you're influencing someone else. Okay, the very first key is to decide on your outcome. Decide on your outcome. You cannot influence others if you don't know where ultimately you want to go. What's the end game? Now this probably sounds simple, but have you ever had somebody come up to you and they start rambling about something, or they're upset about something, or they're going off about something, and you're wondering, do they want something from me? What do they want? And have you ever had this experience where you've actually said to somebody, well, how can I help you? And they'll say, well, I don't know. And what's clear is they haven't even thought where they want to go with the conversation. So what's extremely important before ever approaching somebody is what ideally is your outcome. And the thing I want to say about this is don't be chicken. Sometimes people want something major and they settle for small things in life because they're afraid to ask and go for what they really want. But the key thing is to know your outcome. I came across some research a while back that basically came out with that people who visualize and know their outcome are 73% more likely to be successful in that outcome. In other words, people who take time to visualize the outcome, their success, are 73% more likely to have their request granted. In other words, to have a successful outcome. So I want you to rate yourself on a scale from 1 to 10. 10 is, you know what, before approaching somebody, yep, I do really think where I want to go. 1 would mean, nope, don't even think about it. Where do you place yourself on that continuum? Next, make sure you believe in what you're doing or persuading. Before we can influence others, we need to influence ourselves. It's so important. I remember a while back I was doing a version of this session, and this lady said, well, I'm having problems influencing this policy. And I said, well, what do you think of the policy? She goes, oh, I don't believe in it at all. Well, it's really hard to persuade other people unless we believe it ourselves. And I'm saying this because in the healthcare industry and with all the regulations and all the challenges, it's probably there are things that you and I need to implement, needs to get done. But the question is, do we really believe in it? So you might be sitting there going, on a scale from 1 to 10, 10 would be you completely believe in it, 1 would mean you don't. You might be sitting there going, uh-oh, that's precisely the problem. I don't even believe in it. Well, not to fail, what that means is we really need to go take a step back, maybe research, gather some information, go to our boss or whatever, and really get behind something. And the key is to implement it. Now, let me cover something else. Sometimes somebody will say in my session, well, I need to have people abide by a guideline or policy, and I don't really believe in it. Well, it's crucial that we do believe in it. But at the very least, one thing to never say is, well, I don't agree, but I got to enforce this policy. Because what you do in that moment is you undermine your ability to come across confidently and persuasively, and you also undercut your leadership ability. So I'm saying this because hopefully you believe in it. But if you don't, and you can't get yourself to believe in it, I'm not saying for you to lie. I'm just saying execute on the policy. And if somebody says, well, what do you think of the policy? Just say it doesn't really matter, but we've got to move forward on this. Now, having said that, ideally, we really want to be persuasive because and believe in it because I don't know if you know this, but tone has 5 times the impact of the words we use. Let me say that again. Tone has 5 times the impact of the words we use. So that's why enthusiasm and passion is so important because it's infectious. Perhaps you might have had an experience where somebody has actually talked to you about an idea, but they're so excited. They believe in it so much. You get swept in the emotion and you're like, yes, I'm completely for it. And then maybe later you take a step back and you say, wow, they really influenced me. It's because of their belief and passion really does affect us. And the same thing holds true when we're trying to persuade other people. Now, this is also challenging for some people because some people are not naturally emotive. They don't show emotion. And admittedly, this is going to be tough because if you're come across very stoic, you don't show passion, you don't show enthusiasm, it's harder to persuade other people. It's not game over, but it just does make it tough. So on a scale from 1 to 10, 10 would be you really believe in it, 1 would mean you don't. And we're going back to your case study. Number 3, and again, because we've actually had to put everybody on mute because of somebody who put us on hold and with the music, if you got a question, we're just going to have to, if you can just say you got a question through the chat room, and maybe you can ask the question in the chat room, or you could just say, I got a question, and then we'll unmute everybody, and although there'll be a little bit of music, we'll just deal with it. Okay. Number 3, or the next one, is the next preparation key, is like and or respect that person. People are influenced by people that they like and respect. Okay. Here's a good example of this. Have you ever had somebody come up to you and you haven't even fully heard what they're asking for, but you think in their mind, as soon as they open their mouth, you're thinking, no. You don't even know what they're asking, but you start off with no. Well, if you really think about it, the reason why sometimes we think that in our mind is because we don't like the person or we don't respect the person. And so it is really important to develop that respect with each other. So I'm saying this because on a scale from 1 to 10, 10 would mean you really like and respect the person you're asking for what you need. 1 would mean you're not. If you're sitting there going, yeah, you know what, fundamentally, I don't really like them. That's a problem. So you might say, uh-oh, what can I do? Well, there's a couple things you can do, or a few things. One thing you can do is shift your focus. You could say, what do I appreciate about them? Let me give you an example. Let's say somebody in your hospital is always saying, money, 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 money. And you're thinking, gosh, don't we care about patient care? And, you know, sometimes it's not wise to do certain things. Well, you might say, well, this person, I don't respect them. But maybe you could change the way you're viewing this and say to yourself, you know what, I don't agree with the way they're handling it, but I really do appreciate that they are concerned about money, because if we're not conscious of the profits and if we're not conscious of revenue and how we're spending money, we may not even exist as an organization. I say this because sometimes I'm doing the sessions in particular workplaces, and people are complaining that, you know, in organizations all they do is care about money. But my comeback to that is, do you know what happens to an organization when they don't care about money? So I'm bringing this up to say not that you need to be like that person, but maybe you can appreciate their perspective. Somebody who micromanages you. You might say, they're driving me nuts. Well, one of the reasons why somebody micromanages somebody else is because they're trying to control the situation so it would be successful. Now you might say, but micromanagement is not a good strategy. Absolutely, it's not ideal. But you know what? Most people are doing the best job they can. Let me just pause here and underscore that. I've been doing seminars for over 17 years. And yes, there are some evil people. And yes, there are some people who are just not good people or not kind. But you know what? Most people are really good people. And my experience has been most people are doing the absolute best job they can with what they have at their disposal. They're trying to do a really great job. So you may not totally agree with that person you're trying to persuade, but you may respect them because you could respect their position, respect their knowledge, or just respect their perspective. So on a scale from 1 to 10, 10 would mean you totally respect them. 1 would mean you're not. And then finally, the fourth category in about preparation. And this is perhaps one of the biggest things that most people don't do that could really make a huge difference in the preparation, and that is to do your research. Now I don't mean just any research. I want to talk about each of these aspects. First of all, one thing that can really help is, given the subject matter of what you want to influence, who is the very best at what you are trying to achieve? So for example, maybe you have an idea that would decrease turnover. Who in your organization or beyond your organization is the very best at decreasing turnover? Maybe you can go interview them and find out what they're doing, their keys to success. Perhaps there's a policy that your area is having a hard time influencing, and you want to influence others on this policy or this idea. Maybe what you could do is do some research and find out who is the very best in the industry. One of the advantages among many of being with ONS, and I think ONS, Kate, am I correct, it's the largest oncology organization in the world?
Largest nursing oncology association.
Nursing oncology, yes.
Mm-hmm.
So folks, you have a breadth of network that you can reach out to. So if you're having trouble in your hospital or your organization, maybe you can network with others and find out who's really good at what you're trying to influence others so you can get some keys. Another aspect of research is who's the very best, who's the most influential and key players within your organization. Let me talk to you a little bit about that. There's a book called Blue Ocean Strategy, and it's all about developing a new market. But that's not so relevant here. But what is relevant is the last couple of chapters in the book. In the book, the author explains the key to persuading other people on a new idea, a new market. And so what's relevant here is one of the keys that he discusses, and I found this to be the case, is know who the most influential people in your organization and work on them. See, sometimes people think that they've got to get everybody behind them and their idea, but that's wrong. You only need to give the critical, the most influential minority. So who is really the key players in your organization? And one thing to do is not confuse position with influence. Some people have been with our organization, with your organization, for perhaps a long time, and they don't have that official title that they're in charge of maybe a great deal, but they actually carry a lot of weight. The point is that what you may want to do when trying to influence is think, who are the most influential people in my organization, and work on them, and in turn, that can start the momentum of what you're trying to implement. A third aspect of research is ultimately who you're targeting, who you're trying to influence, one particular person. Think, who do they listen to? So maybe they don't listen to you and I, but maybe they listen to other people, some other people that you know and you could influence. So maybe you can't get directly to the person who's running the hospital, but you could get to somebody else who that person may listen to. I'm just trying to expand how you view things, because people typically look at influence as a direct bullseye with that person, and it either is working or not. And maybe there's some ways to triangulate influence or whatever the case may be. But anyway, on a scale from 1 to 10, 10 would mean you're very good at this. 1 would mean you're not. Okay, here's what I want you to do. Give you a few minutes to take care of this. And you know, when we do these exercises, you may be tempted to go answer your email or do something else. And I don't mean this in a derogatory way, but I mean this is to help you get the most out of the session, is if you do these exercises, it can make a huge difference. So having said that, here's what I'd like you to do. Take your lowest score and think about some actions you can do to improve it. So perhaps maybe, wow, you know what, I scored low on believing in this. You know what, I need to go ask some people and get behind that. Or you know what, I scored really low in research. Wow, Steve's right. I've actually there are some people that are really influential in my organization. I need to go reach out to them. And you know, this other area in our company is really good at this. I need to go find out what they're doing and why they are successful. So anyway, take your lowest score, decide on an action, and then share that action in the chat box if you're comfortable with that, and or raise your hand and share that action that you'll take on. And the reason why I ask you to share this is because what you share may help out other people. Because you know what, folks, who really cares what I have to say? Ultimately, what's most important is what I'm hopefully conveying information-wise lands with you and it helps you out. So ultimately what's most important is how you're going to use this information and adapt it to your situation. So what I'd like you to do is write it in the chat box, maybe an idea you have or what you're going to work on, and or come through the phone lines, and if you're okay with that. And so, Kate, can we open up the phone lines? And
Sure. Yep. I'll unmute them right now.
And remember, anybody who shares
the conference has been unmuted.
Sorry, Stephen. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, actually, it's great. Whoever had us on hold before, sounds like they actually we're no longer on hold. So, well, I've got everybody's attention. Let's actually go in this way because this will make it a lot easier. Oh, they put us.
This is Rose.
Okay.
I'm fairly new to the organization I'm in. How do you identify the people who make influence?
Yeah, excellent question. You know what? We got to ask people, Rose. So I've worked with a lot of people, and what they end up doing when they enter a new organization is they start asking people. And so you might say, Rose, you might start asking people, gosh, how do decisions get made around here? And of course, Rose, everybody's going to say who's ever in charge of the organization. But you can start asking people and say, who's the most influential people here? Who makes things happen? And then you know what? If you think in the framework of, this is what I found anyway, when I think in the framework of who influences who, it opens the doors to things I just didn't see before. So Rose, as you're coming in the organization, admittedly you got to learn that, but I would start asking and probing. Does that help?
To some degree, but it seems like here that decisions all of a sudden get made, and long after they're made, they come out like through email, or you find they affect the people who they affect are like the last people to know, and nobody really knows where the decision came from. We're a community hospital, but we're owned by a larger organization, and a lot of people say that the decisions are made by the main organization, which they don't even come around here into this institution. So
Rose, let me ask you this. What's the request that you have? Who are you trying to influence?
Well, we're trying to set up a survivorship program here, and the CEO kind of shot it down, but we're not really sure why.
So who?
I basically was asked to set it up, but then later told that perhaps they would call on me if they ever moved the project forward. Things here, I guess, at an institution, you don't really know who makes the decisions. They seem like they come from an outside place, and our CEO kind of just follows along and does whatever he's told.
Well, how do you know that for sure? Have you actually asked the CEO?
Well, it just seems like when you go to the town hall meeting and you ask him questions,
yeah,
he talks in circles and doesn't really ever answer the question.
So, Rose, just let me ask you a couple of things. Are you able to actually ask the CEO? Could you have a one-on-one meeting?
I haven't tried, but I have asked questions like in the town hall where there's a lot of other people there.
Yeah, so let me address that. So one of the things on influence, which we'll talk about later, but I'm just going to bring this up now, is sometimes people don't work well if you confront them in a group, and sometimes it is useful. But so what you may want to do, as long as it's appropriate, is to ask for a one-on-one meeting with the CEO, and here's what I would ask. And we're going to cover this later, but I'll just bring it up now. I would ask the CEO point blank about the survivorship program. And if he says, well, actually, as I said, no, the answer is no, say, under what circumstances would have you reconsider? And ask and find out. You may be closer to getting a yes than you ever realized.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just going to give you options here. The other thing is actually maybe problem solve, who does the CEO listen to? Somebody makes the decision. There's always a decision maker. And so, but the rule of thumb is it's better to confront people not in front of everybody, although you can. And sometimes you can work the angles by actually thinking about who they actually influence. But the point is that I would actually, somewhere along the line, you got to ask the person directly. And we're going to cover some other things down the pike here. But one of the things you can ask somebody, or the CEO or whoever, if they say no, is under what circumstances would have you change your mind? What would you need to do to reconsider?
Okay.
Does that help give you some ideas?
Yes, it does. Thanks.
Okay. And Stephen, we just had two comments come in the chat box, and one was just a participant noting that her lowest score was deciding on the outcome because she doesn't tend to ask for what she really wants, but what she thinks that she can get, which I think is probably a common emotion felt among many. And another person had a suggestion here and suggested that you should research who are the most influential players and those who can affect the change.
Yes. Well, and that's so let's take the latter first. That's what I meant by the influencing, is know who are your influential players who can affect change. And to the first point, Kate, what you brought up about what somebody had indicated about, is to ask for what you really want. And folks, that really actually may be challenging for some, because the truth is that some of us are afraid of getting this happen. No. Now, if you find yourself having a hard time asking for things, one little tip is you can go hang out in an elementary school. You may want to call before you show up. And I'm being somewhat funny here, but the reason why, or trying to be anyway, but the reason why I'm bringing this up is because if you're ever around children, you know they are request machines. And what does no mean to a child? Ask again. And so the reason why I'm bringing this up is what may be useful is, and for us to look at, is just asking for what we really want. And here's the rule of thumb. Ask for what you really want, and you can always compromise. But if you ask small, if you ask for something very small, the person says no or is resistant, there's not a lot of room to go because you already started off small. What you may want to do is start off big. If the person says no, under what circumstances would have you reconsider? What do you need to hear that would have you reevaluate this? And that type of thing. And for many of us, what the issue really is we hate to hear no. But that's, what does no mean? I was doing a seminar a couple weeks ago, and one of the folks who actually also addressed the same audience was a big executive in this corporation, and he said, I hope I get this right, he said, a no is a slow yes. And his philosophy is you keep asking and persistent, because eventually you can persuade somebody. So the importance of thinking big. Kate, does that kind of cover both things?
I think so. I think so. And just to address one more, we're having several comments, which is fabulous that people are chiming in on this. We do have a good question here that many people might be wondering, and that is, what do you do when you lose faith in the influential players?
That's a big problem. And so a couple things just philosophically. When we lose faith with influential players, maybe check in whether we're losing faith because of something we firsthand have witnessed, or is it hearsay information? The reason why I say this is because my experience is that people are so tough on other people. We're so hard on other people. We're sometimes so unforgiving of other people and assuming good intent. So without knowing the particulars, maybe someone is really just a stickler on time, or they're stickler on budget, or they're stickler on things, so we lose faith because they say, oh, they don't care about patient care or whatever. But we don't really necessarily know. Maybe they're just they don't realize how they're coming across. So I think one thing that can help is giving somebody the benefit of the doubt and assuming good intent. Other than that, I would need to know the particulars. So because of the challenge I know with the music and people coming through the lines, if that whoever asked that question, if that didn't get addressed, please call me afterwards and I'll just get that handled. Because the key thing is why you've lost respect, or why with the folks that are influential, and what we could do differently. So let me. I just want to make sure we cover the core content, and I really appreciate the feedback and comments. So, Kate, you want to put everybody back on mute?
Yep, I will. And Stephen, just pause before speaking again, because I'll just have to mute everyone and then unmute you.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
The conference has been muted.
Okay, Stephen, you're back on.
Okay. So let's go with the, so now what we're going to do is we're going to talk about how to build an honest, influential conversation. Actually, how do you build it? So Rose, Jennifer, Ann, Sylvia, and I think someone else also shared too. What I want you to, and for everybody on the call, I'm going to walk you through exactly how to have the conversation. The very first step is to state your purpose. Now, this is a lot easier if you've thought through your outcome. The purpose is the main positive, goal-oriented reason why you want to talk to the person. In other words, it's the reason why you're coming to this person. An example would be, I want to talk to you about how we could work better. I want to talk to you about how we can improve patient care. I want to talk to you about creating a survivorship program. What's the reason why you want to talk to the person? You might say, well, is that really important? Absolutely important. Think about it this way. Have you ever had somebody come up to you and they start, and I mentioned this earlier, but they're rambling on a whole bunch of details and you're wondering, wait a minute, what's the purpose? Where are you going with this? Some people are afraid to get to the point first because they think it's going to ruin what they're talking about, but actually it's really helpful for the other person to know the purpose and to hear the purpose. You might say this is so obvious, but have you ever attended a meeting and walked out of the meeting and thought, what in the world was the purpose of that meeting? I have no idea. I mean, some of the most basic things are often missing in a conversation. So first is about knowing your purpose. So you may want to jot down the purpose. Next, what's really critical is to get to know the person or situation. People like people who get to know them. I wrote the last book I co-wrote with Colleen Francis was called Honesty Sells, and it's all about selling, influencing, that type of thing. But one of the core things that I learned out of writing the book and focusing on that material was the most effective salespeople listen more than they talk. Let me say that again. The most effective salespeople listen more than they talk. Perhaps you might have experienced this the opposite. Have you ever walked in a store or maybe went to go buy something and you had the salesperson just talk at you and you're sitting there going, you don't even know me? But then maybe you've had an experience where somebody actually sat down with you and asked you a whole bunch of questions. I'll share with you something that I'll never forget for the rest of my life. Dr. Einhorn, who's, I think, the world-renowned expert on testicular cancer. He's the top expert in the world on testicular cancer. And when he came in, was my appointment time, he spent the first part of the entire appointment asking me questions. Now, we had already supplied him with the data. He could have sat there and scanned over the data and say, okay, here's what you're going to do. But he asked me just a ton of questions. And I was so appreciative and so taken by the way he approached things. I mean, I would have done virtually anything the guy said. And he, besides it being incredibly knowledgeable and incredibly just an incredible person. So I say this because, even people who are spot on, know their stuff, the best ones, my experience is, they actually ask a lot of questions. So I'm going to challenge you right now. With that person that you're trying to influence, whether it's Rose, that CEO, or Jennifer, or your situation, or Sylvia, or Ann, here's my question to you. How well do you know that person? How well have you stopped to get to know that person? Now, you might say, but I don't have direct access. Okay, there might be some challenges, but the key is how well. So, look, these are some of the main areas that you want to focus on, but the A through F right there on this page. But I want to call your attention to a couple. To number C, know their challenges, needs, and wants. Ask them. Find out their goals, number D. And another one is if you can ever find out what's the cost or effect to the person, team, or organization if things stay the same. So, Rose, I'm thinking about particularly in your situation with the whole survivorship program. So if we don't have a survivorship program, what's the cost? Maybe that CEO has never thought through this. And sometimes somebody may say, "What? They know. Really? How do you know that they know? Have you ever made a mistake in your life and had somebody say, well, I thought you knew, and you're like, I had no idea? So it's so important to get to know that person. So on that, what we're going to do is we're going to take a poll here. We're going to see which is the most challenging area for you. And so, Kate, can you go through how to do this poll?
Sure. So here on this page, you'll see the full question and the answers. And then we'll just move to the poll page where you'll see them again. And please just click on your response here, and you'll start to see a bar graph fill as people start to answer. Great. We see a lot of responses coming in.
So while you're voting in, here's the thing. Which areas do you forget to ask about the most? So maybe it's all of them, but maybe there's a couple in particular you just never have really thought of, but you're like, wow, I just never asked that question. And usually it's the most basic ones. And then I'm going to highlight a couple things.
Just a couple more seconds as people answer. They're still trickling in here. Okay, looks like we have all the responses. Would you like me to go ahead and close, Stephen?
That sounds great.
Okay.
And folks, even if some didn't have a chance, it's okay. But clearly, here's the deal. You can see perhaps the biggest one we all tend to forget, and it's pretty usual, is 45% of you. It's the biggest challenges, needs, and wants. And you know what? That's one of the most simplest ones to ask. And some of these others are really great to ask, but that's perhaps one of the most basic ones. And that's where you say, so what's on your mind? Tell me what's going on. Do you know the CEO and the other doctors and nurses and folks in your organization, people doing research, whatever the case may be, do you know what their challenges are? And I'm going to show you why this is key and important as we move forward. So this is an important element that you may, well, how is Steve going to connect this with influence? I'm going to connect it. Don't worry. Oh, and incidentally, by the end of the talk, one of the last things we're going to cover is about how to overcome objections. So I know some of you wanted to know how to overcome objections, and I'm going to give you the secret to having people not even object to begin with, and I'll show you how to avoid that. But that's coming on up. Anyway, having said that, very important to ask those questions. Okay. Step number 3, what are your requests or ideas? So let me explain the difference between knowing your purpose and requests. Purpose is why you want to talk to the person. It's the overall reason. And it may be close, if not identical, to your requests. But it's often a little bit different. So purpose is more global. request is specific. So Rose, just because that was you were, I think, one of the last people to share on the survivorship program. So maybe you asked your CEO or some key players in there about, and so why you want to talk to the person? I want to talk to you about how we can improve patient care. And then when it comes to the request portion, my request is we begin the survivorship program. Whatever it is, here's the key elements, and some of this is on page 6 in your guidebook. Make sure that what your requests are is specific and measurable. It's a big problem because sometimes people make a vague request. I would like, so it's equivalent, Rose, of you saying and folks saying, well, I'd like you to possibly consider a survivorship program. Well, possibly consider a survivorship program. What does that mean? Do I want it? Do I not? By when? And this kind of confronts some people because some people are afraid to ask specific requests because they're afraid somebody's going to say no. But remember, the comeback is if somebody says no, you say, under what circumstances would have you change your mind, or what would you need to see to change your mind, that type of thing. The other thing outlined on that page is to not be a chicken. Of course, we covered that, and to really go for what you want. But the other little trick to this whole thing is doing it in advance. I can't tell you how many times somebody gets a no to their request because they wait till the last minute. So here's an example. You have an idea, let's say a program, something you want done in your organization. Well, why don't you float the balloon early? Say, well, I know as we're looking at budgets for next year, I'd like to request that we instill this program. So maybe they say no, but you start working on them early. So I've found that if you do things in advance, it gives people time to adjust, and they're more likely to ultimately implement it. So before moving on, because the next stage is going to be how to influence and persuade people on your requests. We've been talking about that somewhat, but we're actually going to spend some time on that. Anybody have any questions? Okay, if you can ask through the chat box, that's why we'll kind of just. Kate, do you see anything in there, or should we move forward?
No, nothing's coming through so far. Even if you want to just write in the chat box that you'd like to ask, we can unmute. I think I might have that line narrowed down as to the noisy one. So.
Oh, we do?
I think so, but I'll be able to tell if we're unmuted. So if you would like to respond to that, please let us know. Or else if you want to proceed, and I'll let you know if anyone writes in the chat box.
Okay. So let's move forward, and we're going to go through a major chunk on how to persuade people and the benefits and things like that. And then I'm going to give you some time to work on this. And then I'd like to hear some of the ways you're going to language it, and we'll be able to coach you through it. And then the last portion, again, is going to be about how to work through obstacles and objections, how to avoid it to begin with. But then if it happens, I'm going to give you a 4-step formula on how to work through it. But we'll get there. So step 4, create a statement of influence. Let me kind of back up and then move forward. First of all, to back up, we talked about purpose. So I want to talk to you about how we could work better together, improve patient care. You want to spend time getting to know that other person, asking those questions. Ultimately, my request is X, Y, and Z. And now what we want to do is we want to think what's in it for the other person. Let me pause here and say this. The universal language we all speak in is what's in it for me, what's in it for us. Let me share with you the challenge of this. When people make requests of us, we usually think what's in it for us, right? How we decide we're going to do it. When we make requests of other people, we usually think what's in it for us. The problem is we're usually thinking about who? Us. We might say, gosh, I can't believe it. Doesn't Herman realize that when he doesn't give me this information, it screws up my day? Doesn't the CEO realize that when they don't, this survivorship program or we're not getting this data as nurses, we can't do our job? Well, that may all be true, but that's about us and not about them. The way to get other people to buy into our requests and what we need is by thinking what's in it for them. You may want to write this down. It's kind of a funny truism in life. But I found this to be true, hence a truism. People do exactly what they want to do, and they lie about it. They lie about it. They'll say, Sylvia, you know, I really wanted to help you out. Oh yeah, I really wanted to help, but I got caught up with other things. I got busy. Well, if you think about it, we're all busy. So the truth is, if that person was under some, if they were speaking the truth, it would be, for example, Sylvia, yeah, I know you asked me to do that, but I decided there were more important things to do, so I decided to do that and not what you're asking. We don't say that to each other because it sounds rude, but it's often what we think. The reason why I'm going through this is not to blame other people, and there's nothing wrong here. The key is, if you want somebody to do something, you need to be thinking, what's in it for them? So I'm going to go through these 7 drivers of human behavior, hence the Mount Sammy benefit. And I want you to be thinking, what's in it for them? Then we're going to take another kind of poll, and my question is, what do you think would be the most beneficial to them? Now you see those 7 drivers there, but I want to explain them a little bit more in depth. First, money. Zig Ziglar is an old motivational speaker. He says, money isn't everything, but it ranks right up there with oxygen. So is your request going to improve somebody else's money situation, or within your organization, we might be talking about budgetary dollars. So maybe you have a program, a policy, something you need, or maybe information you need to do a better job, to care for folks, whatever it is. And the benefit to the other person to give you that information, to do that policy, to start that program, is because in the end, it's a better use of budgetary dollars. And one of the interesting things, having done so much work in the government, that sometimes people will say, well, you know, the government, they don't care about money. But that's wrong. I've worked with many folks. They do. They care about better use of taxpayer dollars. So I'm saying this because whether you're working for a nonprofit organization, a profit organization, people care about budgetary dollars. So is your request ultimately going to save or make more money or better use of budgetary dollars? T stands for time. Is your request going to save somebody else's time? Now, I'm not talking about your time. I'm talking about their time. Now, you may be sitting there going, oh my gosh, that's exactly why they're not helping me out, because it's going to take up so much time, their time. Well, what you may want to say to them is be upfront and say, look, I know what I'm asking is going to take time, but in the end, I think it's going to save time. In the end, it's going to save time for you, and then you might want to share that. S stands for security. Is what you're asking going to make somebody else feel more secure or mitigate risk? A stands for achievement. Is your request going to help somebody else achieve more? Now remember, I promised you to kind of connect what we were talking about earlier about getting to know someone. Well, this is really important in this step to get to know somebody in the previous step. Because if you've spent time to know their challenges and their goals and their issues, then you can actually tie in what you need with how it'll help them achieve more of what they say they want. But the issue is, do we really know what their goals are? Do we know what their challenges are? If we don't know what they need to do in their job or what their goals are, it's hard for us to tie it in. So for example, what are other people that you work with, what are their goals? And if you can tie in what you need with how it better serves their goals, it'll make a huge difference in capturing their attention, making a difference. That is all about the message. It's about the mission. It's about really care for other people. It's about that what's in it for the other person is that we really want to make a difference. We all do. Image. Is your request going to improve somebody else's image? Image is an interesting benefit because people lie about it. They'll say, I don't care what people think. Well, my experience is that people tend to care what people think. They tend to care what people think. They just lie about it. And they'll say, I don't care. But the reality is if what you're asking them to do could improve their image, it can make a huge difference. E stands for enjoyment. Is your request going to add more joy or reduce their stress? Here's the easiest way to think about it. In the beginning of the webinar, when I asked you to choose a case study, were you sitting there thinking, wow, this person adds stress in my life or is not stressful for me? Often when I'm doing these sessions live and I can see people's faces and we're talking this through, people will share that their case study is actually making them more stressed. So why not use that to your advantage? if you're stressed, what do you think the other person is thinking when they see us? So what if you were to say, look, I think if we can take care of these things, it'll reduce your stress and other people's stress. That's a very important driver. So here's what I'd like you to do, is knowing that and having gone through these 7 drivers of human behavior, Kate, can you explain again, can you go through the poll and how they can do this?
Sure. Okay, so if you'd like to take a look at this slide so you can see the question and the different choices, I'm going to move to the next screen that's going to leave those choices up there. The question just gets cut off a little bit, so I want to read that to everyone. And that is, which of the 7 Mount Sammy principles has the most influence in your situation? So you're just going to choose one on this screen, and please go ahead and vote now. Okay, looks like we might have all of them. I'm going to close the poll now. Oh, one more. Anyone else? There we go. Any more? Okay.
Okay. Interesting. So what you're identifying for most of you on the phone is what is a big driver for the other person to do what you're asking is about making a difference. So often when people share that, they may be thinking, well, then why is that person, it clearly will contribute to the mission, the message. So why aren't they doing it? Well, often people forget that that it's affecting about making a difference. So what you may want to do is when you make your request, outline and connect it to how it improves the mission. Maybe it's patient care, whatever the case may be, and show them how it really does make a difference. In other words, don't take it for granted that just because you know it makes a difference in the mission, that the other person knows this too. So you may want to expressly state that. Before moving on, and I'm going to show you a couple other steps about connecting what's in it for the other person. Any questions on this? Kate, should we try unmuting and see where this goes?
We certainly can. We certainly can, no promises. But let's try unmuting it here and just see if anybody has any questions at this point.
The conference has been unmuted.
Yeah, sorry, folks. Okay, well, anybody have any questions on this so far?
Okay. I think we might have found the line.
Oh, we did? Okay.
Yep, there we go.
Okay, great. So now we can really get rolling with this. So anybody have any questions? So if you could take your phone and keep it on mute, now your own phone on mute, and then take it off mute when you have a question or comment or whatever. And I want to remind you, those of you who shared stuff, we're going to send you those documents after the call as a reward for actually sharing stuff. So how's this landing with you all, folks? Because I can't see your faces, which is kind of the biggest challenge with webinars. So going through the 7 drivers of human behavior, are you able to see some benefits there? Okay, I see Jennifer.
Well, it kind of helps while you're going through it. Like my wheels are spinning, thinking how I can utilize that in my interactions.
Okay, and who is this who just spoke?
Rose.
Oh, great, Rose. Thank you. The most important thing I've found in this, and then we're going to move on the next couple steps, and then I'll give you time to put this all together, is this. When somebody is resistant to what you're asking, sometimes they're not clear. That's often the case. But the other thing is they often fail to see the benefit, and yet we give up. Instead of saying, look, here's the benefit to you. In other words, people talk about win-win. Win-win means we benefit and they benefit. But it's actually expressly stating, basically you're making your business case as to why it would be beneficial. So Rose, in your case, the survivorship program. What's the benefit of actually having that? And gosh, I know there's benefit. And I'm sure there's other people who see the benefit, but sometimes we get lost in other things and we forget how beneficial what we're doing can be, and for other folks as well. All right, so let me. I'm going to give you. There are 3 parts to a statement of influence. The first part is the benefit 7 drivers of human behavior. So now that you've identified the benefit to the other person, let me go to the next step, and that's part 2. Is connect it with people emotionally and logically. People, so if everybody can put their phone on mute, here's some stuff in the background. People make decisions on emotions and they justify with logic. Let me say that again. People make decisions on emotions and they justify with logic. Here's an easy example. You go to a store, you buy something that wasn't something that you actually had set out to buy. You're driving home. Ooh. You're driving home. What do you think? Well, I needed it. I really worked hard. We start to rationalize. In other words, you already bought it. So what happened is we often make decisions on emotions and we justify with logic. Now, if you get home and you can't support logically why you bought it, then you may return it. So I'm not saying that logic is not important. I'm not saying information is not important. But here's what I am saying. Emotions connect with people. People make decisions on emotions and they justify with logic. This is challenging because people say, I need to see more data. But often the reason why they need to see more data is because they're driven by one of those 7 drivers of human behavior we discussed called security. They want to see more data to feel more secure. But I'll prove it to you, it isn't the data in and of itself. Have you ever presented your case and had tons of data, absolute, a lot of data, and had the person still not make that decision, still not move in their favor? We must connect with emotions. So you might say, well, how do we do it? And that's the third part. And then I'm going to give you time to put it all together. Creating pictures. If people can visualize it in their minds, they're more likely to believe it. People think in pictures. They don't think in words. I'll prove it to you. Think of a cup of coffee. It's doubtful that you thought of the words cup of coffee. Now, some people do, but most people, it's pictures. And I'll give you a great historical example to show you how important it is to create visual imagery. And that's what will move people, not information alone. One of the best historical speeches ever, is Martin Luther King's speech, I Have a Dream. He talks about visual imagery, about children walking hand in hand, and many other images he paints in that speech. He had 0 statistics. Let me say that again, 0 statistics. And yet it's known to be one of the most influential speeches ever in history. Look, I'm not saying we don't need information. I'm saying just don't forget about connecting with people with images. And so you might say, well, how do I do that? One great way to do this is by using stories, examples, and analogies. So, Rose, back to you, just season on that, is maybe there's you might share of a couple hospitals that do have a survivorship program, and maybe share some stories, share some patient case studies. And in other words, it's not just statistics that we want to present, but you got to give people stories and examples. The other thing is, think about this. How have you and I learned since we were little kids? When we were little kids and they were teaching us about being honest and all the important values that our parents tried to instill in us, they told stories, even children's stories. They're not filled with data. It's stories and images. That's why we like movies, or most of us do. Some people don't. But the idea is, tell stories and give examples. The best examples are your own personal ones. That's the next point. And then the third point there on that slide is statistics to meaningful pictures. In other words, break down statistics to meaningful pictures. Here's an easy example of that. You ever been stayed awake late at night, you're flashing through the TV, and you see a child who's in poverty or starving, and the announcer says, for 50 cents a day, you can support this child, and they'll have, food, or whatever the case may be, or X amount of kids will have food for every, $1 you give or $2 you give. Notice they don't say, well, to cure poverty, we need trillions of dollars. So just send what you can. The reality is, because they know that it will not move the needle. If you need to present statistics, make sure it's meaningful. Instead of saying it's millions and trillions and all that stuff, translate it. Here's an example. Instead of saying to somebody, well, if we do this program, it's going to save us, $3 million. Maybe what it could say is, wow, we would save $3 million or $100,000. Let's go with that. It'd save $100,000. But you know what? If we save $100,000, we could hire one person, a couple people part-time, or one person part-time, and buy this or buy this equipment or whatever. I mean, I'm just brainstorming here. But the point that I'm trying to make is translate what that money or whatever statistic into meaningful things. I'll share with you. Years ago, I went to a fundraising dinner to help people who are suffering from domestic violence. Now, I can't share with you how many thousands of women suffer from domestic violence, but I can share with you this statistic. Every 15 heartbeats, a woman suffers from domestic violence. Every day, 3 women die. How do I remember this? Because they had those statistics, but they broke it down into meaningful pictures. That's what I'm talking about. The other technique you can use to kind of help people with visual images is ask them, well, so what do you see it would be like if we did have this survivorship program, or if you did have this information, or if this policy was improving? Ask them how they see it would impact their lives. One thing that's another kind of truism in life is if we say something, somebody may doubt it. If they say it, it's true. So if you can help guide somebody to come up with an image and how it may impact them, that may even be more persuasive. So here's what I want you to do. I'm going to give you some time to reflect on this and to try this out, and then I'm going to explain it. And then I'd like you to write some stuff down. I'm going to give you about 5 minutes to do this. And then I'd like to hear some examples. And those of you who are willing to share the example, besides us sending those documents that I promised you earlier, if you share the example of what you write down, I can coach you and guide you through this as well. So let me explain what I mean by this. Go to page 10 in your handout. Now, those of you who may just have got this electronically and you haven't printed it out yet, well, just go to page 10. And what I want you to do is create a statement of influence. A statement of influence, okay? A statement of influence, so we're right there on page 10. That's a sample. And on page 11, I want you to sketch out your own one. A statement of influence is a Mount Sammy benefit, so what's in it for the other person? Money, time, security, achievement, making a difference, image, and enjoyment. Then the logic, because remember, logic, data is important, and then paint a picture. Now, we have one there that we use for our company, but it hopefully can, by going through this real quick, you can see how you could do your own and the effect it can have. So we talk about communication being and how costly it is to organizations. And then we'll cite the research shows that the number one reason why people leave an organization is due to communication relationship issues, and often this and specifically because of the relationship with their boss. Also, research shows it costs anywhere between 25% to 1 to 2 times somebody's salary, et cetera, et cetera. So the number one reason why people leave is because of the relationship with their boss, and it costs between 25% to 1 to 2 times somebody's salary. So if you go down to painting a picture, you can see what we're doing. For example, an employee who earns $50,000 and leaves the company, conservatively, at 25% of their salary, the organization just lost $12,500. So what could, and then what often we'll do is we'll talk about, how that impact of that money and that kind of thing. The point that I'm trying to say is, if you just said 25% to 1 to 2 times somebody's salary, what does that mean? You want to give an example. So, Rose, with your situation, the survivorship, maybe what you do is, what's a benefit to the organization? Money, time, security, achievement, making difference, image, and enjoyment. What's the logic? What's the data that supports why we should have a survivorship program? And then share some stories. Maybe share some people who have been part of the program and the difference it makes. That's what I'm talking about. So what I want you to do is sketch out your own on page 11. I'm going to give you, we'll give you about 4 or so minutes on this, and then I'd like to hear some examples. So sketch it out. I'm going to put my phone on mute, sketch it out, and then I want to hear some examples. And then after that, the last chunk is going to be about how to work through objections, and how to even avoid that. But so if you could take some time to do that, and if you have any questions, please ask it through the chat room. And Kate, is all the phones now? Yeah, they're all on.
They're all unmuted. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So here's what we can do. I'm going to put you on mute, my phone on mute. But if you got a question while you're working on this, just come through the phone line. Just take your phone off mute and ask it, and I'm here for you. Okay? So I'll give you about 4 minutes to work on this. Go ahead. And if you got any questions, of course, ask too. Okay, folks, I'd like to, let's hit the next slide. So if you, who would be willing to share what they wrote, their statement of influence? So again, it's the Mount Sammy benefit, the logic, and the painting a picture. And the other benefit, too, is by sharing this, besides, of course, we'll send you those documents that I promised earlier, but the other thing is other people get to hear the one you're sharing, and they might be able to help you out, too. So either way, who would be willing to share the one they wrote? Even if it's rough, not perfect, don't worry about that.
So I can go. This is Jenny Kelly.
Okay, it's Jenny, you said?
Yes.
Okay, Jenny, great.
So I wrote, this is about discharge phone calls, but I wrote, our lowest patient satisfaction scores are those surrounding discharge readiness and speed to discharge. Then second lowest are the scores of nurses keeping patients informed about the plan of care. At discharge, patients are rushing to get out. We are rushing to inform them of what they need to do. We could influence, positively impact the patient's care at home by touching base after discharge with a quick phone call. We could proactively identify needs and problems and help patients stay at home. We need to get better in these areas, and we need patients' impressions and input as to how to get better. The fourth floor does it. Infusion does it. We need to be doing this to become expert nurses at what we do.
Oh, that's really great. Now, a couple things, Jenny. Let me ask you. Who are you going to make this request to?
My staff,
okay.
About 60 nurses.
Okay. So you know your staff well, or, and you may not know them perfectly, but in essence, the benefits that you shared in that statement of influence, will that drive your staff to more likely to say yes? Is that beneficial to them?
I would think so.
Okay. And so that's one thing. So I just want to make sure, because you know your world better than me. So as long you want to make sure that so you know your staff, and folks, here's the easiest way to kind of view this. You know the folks around you, and if you don't know, then we really need to get to know them, that earlier step. But let's say we have an idea. What's going to help them? So, for example, Jenny, most people, and I picked this up on your surveys, but the folks who attended this webinar, most people are very time impoverished, very cramped for time. So, Jenny, if there's any way to tie it on how ultimately it will save people's time, but it also may be patient care, a lot of that stuff. So the key is the benefit to your staff, not the patient, right? That may be there. But really what we're talking about is a benefit to the staff. So if you want to persuade the staff, you need to show them what's in it for them. So it sounds like you did it. You know it well. The other thing is about the more specific and tangible examples. So maybe in addition to what you said, so I don't think it's an or, it's an addition, is instead of just saying the sixth floor did it, maybe sharing a specific example of what the sixth floor did. Just share a recent example. Maybe the effect it had on somebody. Maybe you saw them smiling, or the effect, or whatever the case may be. The more tangible example that they can see it in their mind, the more it's going to impact them. So the more vivid imagery, and I don't mean it has to be long. I just mean the more they can see it in their mind, the more likely they're going to achieve it, or move towards it. Does that help, Jenny?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And great job. Thank you for sharing that. Let's hear one or two more, and then we're going to go to the how to handle objections. That's the last major core of it. Who else would go?
This is Ann Reiner in Portland again.
Hi, Ann.
I come from the education model, but I think being a cancer nurse for so long, this is just my background. Being a cancer nurse for so long, I understand the importance of presence. And what I'm finding is that presence isn't, the ability to be present when you're with patients and families is not really part of curriculum. So my argument is the practice of nursing involves more than performing delegated medical functions such as administering medications and monitoring physiological data. Effective and compassionate nursing care involves critical thinking and communicating a presence of concern, caring, and respect. I believe this presence can be taught, and with instruction and practice, our graduates will positively influence patient care outcomes. Imagine patients with chronic illnesses asking physicians how they can better participate in their care. Imagine physicians asking nurses what input they have about improving symptom management. I would argue that all involved would experience increased well-being either personally and or professionally.
Oh, I love it, Ann. And is there an example that you've seen that you could even share, like a personal example you've seen where someone was more present and they did what you're sharing with Imagine a World or Imagine folks doing this? Have you seen that happen, that you could actually share a personal story?
Oh, yeah, in my practice. Uh-huh.
So give us one.
I think one that comes to mind most easily is cancer nurses are a lot about pain management, and we understand that effective cancer pain management includes the use of opioids. And there are still multiple biases from patients and families and physicians, sometimes out of ignorance, that creates reluctance to use opioids to manage pain. And I know that being able to listen, as you pointed out, and also being present helps me advocate to whichever party for use of narcotics for better pain management.
So, Ann, can you? And you don't have to share any. You don't have to share this, but can you think of a specific patient just come to mind that represents what you're talking about right now, where you interacted with about pain management with a patient and the effect it had? Can you think of an example?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's an example. So I would, in addition, again, it's kind of what Jenny shared. Not an either or, but I would share a specific example. Does that make sense?
It does, but maybe I'm just getting too old to be influenced by. It's like reading newspaper articles where they start out the sad story.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. Oh boy, I'm so tired of being influenced that way. That doesn't appeal to me. But that's.
So let's discuss that. And I think in some cases people, you do it in a manipulative way. So and I think what's often missing when I've seen this, because I've had people say, well, that's that doesn't necessarily move the needle with me. What I think what I've seen is it lacks the information and data. So where I'm headed with this is what you shared on this call I think is terrific. So if you can add a specific example in addition, that's great.
Yeah.
But not to replace what you're talking about, Ann, because I'm right with you. Essentially what I'm understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, but what you're saying is when people just share their sad story and that's that just doesn't work for you.
Well, it engenders it engenders pity, and that's not what we're talking about. Yeah,
and so, Ann, you know your world better than mine, right? Obviously better than me.
Yeah.
What you may want to look at is have an example in addition, but not replace what you wrote and what you're sharing.
Yep.
That's the key thing. And so it's just something to consider. But, folks, I think I just want to underscore, what Ann's bringing up is really important. If you just tell stories or you just play on people's emotions and there is no logic, there is no information, there is no data that supports it, it will not move the needle. It is not a matter of emotion. Emotions do make the decisions often, but people do need the logic and information data to support it. It goes hand in hand. I'm just pointing out because a lot of people often just do information and they don't do the emotion. But, Ann, to your point, some people just do the emotion. They play on the emotional strings, but they don't do the data. Both are important. Ann, does that kind of help explain it better?
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, and thank you, folks. Let me move to the last portion because I only get about 25 minutes left with you. And so I want to talk to you about resolving objections. All right, and let me kind of cut to it. There's two ways to handle objections. One is to create an environment where they're less likely to happen. The second is what to do when they do happen. So I want to give you the best strategy I can give you to help eliminate objections from ever happening. And the most important strategy I can give you is to proactively, right there, proactively bring up the objections first and address them. People tend to trust people who proactively share and address the other side or viewpoint. Let me give you an example of this. You ever have somebody presents just one side of their argument, and they actually makes it sound everything is great. Maybe there's a drug, for example, that somebody will come in and say, oh, this is great because look at all these positive things. And then, and we've seen this on commercials, right? And they rattle off real quick all the side effects. But basically what they're doing is, oh, look at all these advantages. Or somebody who asks you or suggests a policy or program, and they tell you all the positive side, but they don't really say any negative side. So you and I make the decision. We go forward. Oh, this sounds good. Well, after we purchase or make that decision or move forward with it, if we find out there was a whole downside, that we were unaware of, and we feel burned, we will never trust that person again. So now, getting to this portion of the session, I could say this. The most important thing with ever persuading anybody is always be honest. Always be honest. So if what you're suggesting is going to cost more money, is going to take more time, is whatever the case may be, proactively bringing this up. There's a lawyer, his name is Jerry Spence. I haven't seen him on TV for years. I don't even know if he's around, but he wrote he wrote a book called How to Win an Argument Anytime, Anywhere. I'm messing up the title, but essentially it was a book about his secret or his keys to success. Jerry Spence's claim to fame is he never lost a court case from 1969 until when he stopped practicing. I mean, he practiced for many, many years. In the book, he describes one of his keys to success was to be honest. And what he meant by being honest, and what he said, is that basically he said he would take his client's worst things that somebody could say about his client's position, and he would proactively share this before the other attorney had a chance to say it. In other words, he wouldn't allow somebody to play gotcha. And there's a reason why that strategy tends to work, because it actually shows confidence in what you're suggesting. It shows that you've thought it through. It shows credibility. Now, I'll tell you, I've coached some people, and they say, but you know what? I'm concerned. Actually, what I'm suggesting, there is a downside. Well, I think we owe it to the other person before making the suggestion for us to thought this through, the pluses and the minuses. So I would bring up something proactively. I wouldn't just wait for them to ask us questions. And I definitely wouldn't hope they don't discover it. Because in this world with Google and all the things that we have access to, eventually we all do find out the truth. And when somebody finds out there's a downside, we burn that relationship. So one of the ways to bond with people is to proactively bring up objections. And so it may be, look, before you sign off on this, I just want to honor, there are some challenges with implementing it. But then, here's the key. Say to the person why you still think it's a good idea. So I'm not saying you just say, well, the downside of what I'm suggesting is it costs more, whatever, time-wise, whatever, and leave it be. No, I'm suggesting that what you may want to do is bring up those objections and then say, but I still believe this is a good case. I'll give you a hypothetical. Let's say what you're suggesting is going to cost more money, right, than another possible program or another way to approach something. I would bring it up. I'd say, look, I just want to honor what my approach is going to cost more money. I just want to let you know it is. But I still think it's worth it because X, Y, and Z. So essentially what I'm suggesting is what you may want to do is proactively bring up the objection before they have a chance to bring it up and actually then get it addressed. So here's what I'd like you to do. And I'll give you a couple of minutes, and then we got to move forward because it's a little bit behind, and I want to make sure we cover everything else. And I want to give you a 4-step formula on how to overcome objections when they happen. But what I'd like you to do is think of the Mount Sammy and rate the top obstacles that may prevent you from getting what you want. In other words, look at the money, time, security, achievement, image making a difference, etc. Making a difference, image, and enjoyment. Outline which are the biggest negatives to what you're suggesting. Write this down on this page in your guidebook, and then I think it's on page 12. And then jot down how you're going to overcome it. Why is it still beneficial? So in other words, I want to help you. Instead of hoping that the person doesn't see the downside, I want you to feel confident in having brought this up. And you know what? If you feel insecure, well, gosh, there's a downside, and I don't know what to overcome with that, well, that's a problem. Because I think in this day and age, we owe it to the person that when we're suggesting an idea to have thought through the downside and to talk it through. So anyway, I'll give you about a couple minutes to jot down how you may do this. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you that 4-step formula on how to overcome objections when it gets thrown at you and you completely didn't prepare for it. So what I'd like you to do is jot down what's the biggest reasons why somebody may not move or go with what you're suggesting, and how you plan to overcome that. Just jot that down on page 12. And of course, if you have any questions, just come through take your phone off mute and just ask me any questions, and we'll go from there. I'll give you about 2 minutes to do this. Give about 30 more seconds, and then we're going to move forward. Okay, anybody have any questions on this before we go to the how to kind of resolve objections when they get thrown at you? Anybody have any questions on this?
This is Rose. I have one. One of the problems we have here with anything that a nurse wants to put into place or put into any kind of ideas, the culture here is that nursing is not a profession. Only physicians are seen as professionals. And anytime you have an idea or something, you always have to have a physician behind you, a physician there presenting with you. And one of the problems I see, because I've heard it come up with other programs that people were trying to initiate here before, is that one of the things the cancer survivorship is, it's a fantastic thing for like nurse practitioners to do. We kind of already function in that realm already, but the physicians here, they're private practice, and I could foresee them feeling that, you know, if a nurse practitioner is seeing my patient, they're not getting good care because they should be seeing a physician.
Okay, so essentially, Rose, if I understand you correctly, and I did pick up this in the survey, is that sometimes the resistance to an idea could mean that just simply because you or a nurse is suggesting it in a physician's world, so to speak. Am I correct? So have you ever said that to the physician and say, look, I just want to acknowledge that sometimes people are resistant to our ideas because we're nurses, and having said that, here's why I am suggesting it. To kind of get that elephant out in the room, have you ever tried actually just bringing that out in the open?
No.
Okay, so here's something, and then I'm going to show you kind of another way to kind of deal with objections in a moment, Rose. But this, I want to address this head on. Folks, I picked up in the survey that some of you are having a challenging time because in your organization people may dismiss what you have to offer because of whatever, right? With their physician or they're somebody at a different level or a different part of the organization, or they're responsible for different things or whatever. One of the best things to diffuse something is actually get that out in the open and bring it up. I'd bring it up. I'd say, listen, I just want to, if it was me, Jenny, excuse me, Rose, what you could try, and that was Rose who was speaking, right?
Yes.
So, Rose, what you could say is, look, I just want to acknowledge that, I mean, some people are not even open to ideas coming from nurses, and having said that, I think this is a great idea, and I am a nurse. In other words, stand with confidence. I don't mean come from insecurity, but actually bring them up. You know what you may find, Rose, that some people do is if they thought that, by the mere fact that you brought it up, it's going to have them try to prove you wrong. Rose, no, I'm open to ideas. See, now you're putting pressure on them to actually show you that they will consider your idea. Look, of course, nothing can correct everything, right, Rose? I agree. I mean, some people, they're going to be resistant for whatever. But one of the strategies in dealing with that is to bring it up front. So just something to try.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. All right, so let me get to the last part about how to deal with objections, right? So I'm going to go, this is called the PARA method. And like we did at the very beginning of the webinar, I want you to do towards the end, and then I'm going to go through some details in particular. I want you to rate yourself on a scale from 1 to 10 in each of these steps. 10 would mean you're really good at it. 1 would mean you're not. So this is what to do when you're throwing out an idea, you're running into a buzzsaw, and you're getting resistance back. What to do. I want you to rate yourself on a scale from 1 to 10. 10 is you're really good at this, 1 is you're not. All right? And just so you know, there's in your handout, there's a lot of extra stuff that we're not going to have time to cover in this last portion that's in your handout. So you may want to go back to that. But what I'm going to do in these remaining moments, this last 12 or so minutes, is I'm going to highlight the most important things out of these steps. So let's jump right to it. Okay, the first step in the PARA method is probe and listen from a position that we do not know. Probe and from a position that we do not know. Now you might say, well, Steve, that's kind of obvious. Oh, really? Hard to see it with yourself, but much easier to see it with somebody else. Have you ever watched two people in an argument? Most of them, if you pull them aside and you say, well, do you think the other person listens to you? They'll say, no. You tell the other person, do you think that the other person listens to you? No. In other words, both people don't feel like they're being listened to. So even though when somebody gives you resistance and they say, well, I disagree, you're going to want to debate them. But the first step is probe. And one of the ways to do that is, wow, can you tell me more about this? The number one reason why you want to probe when you get resistance is I have found that most people, whatever they initially say is the problem is almost never the real problem. In other words, if somebody initially tells you is the problem is almost never the real problem. Check out your profession. How often has a patient told you something and you probe and you find out that something else is driving it? So whatever they initially tell you is often not really what's going on. For example, they might say, well, I can't sleep, or I'm having sleep problems. You might say, oh, well, we have the medication for that. But maybe it's stress. Maybe there's stuff happening at home. Whatever the case may be, probe and listen from a position that we do not know. Because the number one reason why you want to do that is what I found is most of the time what somebody initially says is the problem is almost never the real problem. And if you just ask one question and you just answer that, you may find that it doesn't solve their issue. So the first step is to probe. So rate yourself on a scale from 1 to 10. 10 is you're really good at probing first. 1 is, you know what, I tend to not do it. I just jump to my response. Step number 2. Coming up here, now it's working again. So align and connect with the other person. Let me describe that. Align and connect with the person. It's basically showing that you really get where they're coming from. This is not aligning. I see what you're saying, but that's not aligning. Aligning is really showing them. It's paraphrasing back. Let me give you an example. Let's go back to Rose, what you were saying. You had the survivorship program, you bring it up, and they say, well, no, I actually don't think it's a good idea. It's going to cost us money, whatever, et cetera. Probe would be, well, tell me a little bit more about this. Well, we're really tight on resources, and we don't have enough folks to kind of deal with and set up that program, et cetera, et cetera. All right, anything else going on? We just don't have the resources to get this done. Aligning would mean, you know what, if I were you and if somebody like me was asking for the survivorship program, asking for this, you know what, I can see why you're saying no. We are really strapped for resources. I can completely get that. How you know you've aligned is when you do this face-to-face, the person's head will nod in agreement. Yes, that's exactly what's going on. So on a scale from 1 to 10, rate yourself. 10 would mean you're really good at aligning. 1 would mean you're not. My experience has been watching people get in an argument. Most people talk at each other, they don't probe, and they definitely don't align, and they use this ridiculous line. We've all done this, but it's ridiculous when we do it. I see what you're saying, but, because the other person's saying, you don't get what I'm saying. Aligning means that you can show, you know what, I get where you're coming from. Aligning does not mean agreeing. Sometimes when I've coached people, they say, well, I don't want to align because I don't agree. I didn't say that you agree with them. I'm saying that you can get where they're coming from. Rate yourself on a scale from 1 to 10. Number 3 is respond. Respond. Now is your chance to respond. When you respond to the objection, think of Mount Sammy. What's in it for them? Let me kind of back up and move forward. Backing up for a moment. First step would be, survivorship program. Oh, well, we don't have the money. So what's going on? Well, we're really strapped for resources, and we've got these other programs coming down the pike, and we're trying to do the best job, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You know what? If I were you and I was listening to me coming to you about this program, I can see why you would say that. I absolutely get that. The reason why I still think it's an idea that we should consider and move forward is I think it would benefit money, time, security, et cetera, or whatever. I'll give you an interesting twist in life, and I can't tell you why this is the case, but I can just tell you it often is the case. Often the reason why somebody doesn't want to do something is the exact reason why they should. Let me give you an example. Somebody says to you, we don't have the budget. That's exactly why we should do it, because our budgetary dollars are so limited, this is going to help in the long run. I don't have the time to implement what you're saying. That's exactly why we need to do this. We are all strapped for time, and if we can take care of and implement this program, imagine the amount of hours that will save down the road. So consider this, that the reason why somebody is offering resistance may actually be the exact reason why they should do it. Just something to consider. Anyway, probe, align. Number 3 is respond. And rate yourself on a scale from 1 to 10. Here's what I'm looking for. 10 would mean when you respond, you come from what's in it for them. 1 would mean you come from what's in it for you. So are you coming when you respond and say, well, I still think it would be beneficial because I still think it would benefit you, the organization, by X, Y, and Z. Finally, the final step, and then I'll give you some last takeaway points and we'll wrap up for today, is this. In the PARA method, ask. We are so afraid to do this final step. Asking would be, so did I answer your question? Did that get this issue resolved? When I ask people, why don't you ask in the end why this thing got handled? A lot of people are afraid. They're afraid somebody's going to say, well, as a matter of fact, I still don't see your point of view. But you know what? When's a good time to find out that they're still not in agreement? If they do say no to this last step, go back to probing. Very often we've missed in the probing step. And this is so important. You know why? Because have you ever had this experience where somebody says, yes, 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 and then they don't implement what you're asking? When would you like to know that they're resistant? So I believe in going for it. At the end, just say, did this answer the question? Did this answer the objection? So the first step, so kind of in recap, it would be this. A survivorship program. Well, we don't have the resources. Well, tell me what else was going on. Well, we're supposed to be doing these programs, and we're doing this, this, and this, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You know what? If I were you and I was listening to me, coming from your point of view, I can see why it would not be advantageous to take this on. The reason why I still think you may want to consider it, and I'm still a proponent on this, is because I think ultimately we will actually save a tremendous amount of time and bring a tremendous amount of benefit. And that's why we're all here. And I would go through the response. And then finally I might say, did that answer the question? Did that answer the issue? So on a scale from 1 to 10, rate how well you do. Do you often ask, did that answer the question, or are you afraid? 1 would mean afraid you don't do it. 10 would mean you do. Couple things is to take your lowest score. We're going to move forward because I actually want to finish off the session because I realize we're a little bit short on time. But what I would implore upon you is to take your lowest score and to focus on that. And so instead of trying to do all 4 steps, take your lowest score and focus in on that. Finally, step number 6, plan to implement what you're asking. Who will do what by when? Make sure whenever you're leaving a conversation, it's clear who's going to do what by when. How often has this happened to you? Where you've wrapped it up, you've had a great conversation, and it's not clear who's going to do what. And then we're feeling bad. Well, maybe I'll give them more time, or I don't want to pressure them. But why not say, okay, here's an easy way to solve this. When you're wrapping up the conversation, you say, okay, great. What's the next step? Who's going to do what by when? Do you want me to do something? And it basically just wrap that up. And by saying, what's the next step? Most important, make sure there's a last step. Before I turn this, a next step. Before I turn this back over to Kate, those of you who did share, send us an email saying that you did so, or Kate, if you could send us the emails, or you could send Kate the email, and Kate, you can relay to us, whatever's easiest. You can just go to info@stephengaffney.com, just put in your name and say, look, I actually shared on the call. And what we're going to share for those of you who did is the presentation skills article and how to eliminate complaining. Those of you, if you actually implement one of the strategies we're talking about, I'll tell you what, I'll also send you those articles, but only if you actually use something we talked about today. And I'll also send you an article, a chapter about the truth, the startling truth about why honesty sells, and it actually has some specific things that we didn't have time to cover in this session. We'll send that to you. All I'm asking you to do is implement something and just tell us that you did so. And finally, before I turn this back over to Kate, you know what? I just want to thank you for attending this session because I get really excited about this stuff, and as you can probably tell, but one of the reasons is because what you do from personal experience makes a huge difference. And when I was sitting in that chair getting chemo, and I was going through that, those nurses who were around me made a world of difference and enabled me to even get through the stuff I had to get through, and I had the easy cancer to fix. I can't imagine the tough cancers, and what I mean by this is specifically all the hard work you do. So I hope what we've been able to go through has made a huge difference, and I am really honored that I get a chance to be with you over these past couple hours. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Stephen. And first, I'd also like to just echo Stephen's sentiments and just thank everybody who participated today. There were several people who had also participated via chat that we didn't get to specifically address your points, but I will make sure that Stephen does know about that, and I want to thank you so much. If there are questions that were not addressed in there, we will be sure to get those to Stephen, so don't worry about that. I would also just like to end on the notes. Jen Kelly just added a great point to the point that Rose brought up about the voice of the nurse and the influence of the nurse. And Jen just encourages her colleagues not to participate in the viewpoint that the nurse has to stand behind the physician. She said it's buying into a culture where we are seen as invisible. We're the largest body of healthcare workers. There is much evidence that NPs are effective, and many places have had a successful program based Oh, I missed that last part there, Jen, based on advanced practitioners who are nurses. So thank you, Jen, and I'm sure that there are many also who would echo those sentiments. I also would like to just give a very heartfelt thank you to Stephen Gaffney today. Stephen, the message is just wonderful. There are many directly applicable points, and so I do encourage everyone to write to Stephen about those things that you were able to accomplish and implement based on what you've learned today. And I just want to wrap up finally by reminding everyone that there will be continuing education for this webcast. The link to the Evaluation Center will be here on the LDI virtual community, what you see on your screens right now, and that link will be available tomorrow on Friday, November 18th. So thank you once again to everyone for participating. Thanks so much to Stephen. We greatly appreciate your time and talent, and good night to everyone.